Well, rhubarb's coming up. About time to get the garden ready. Need to pull all the weeds out. I need to go get a bucket to put these in. Had a soil test done a couple years ago and showed everything's pretty good, but it's a little low on magnesium. So picked up some Epsom salts. This one happens to have a little bit of sulfur in it. Last summer we had a drought, but just before the drought took off, I noticed that these rhubarb plants were starting to get a little bit of yellow in the leaves. That's a sign of low magnesium or low sulfur, one or the other, as a rule. So I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit of Epsom salt on them. I have this cup here, which is precisely that size. I'm going to take it and use it to spread a little Epsom salt over this bed before I put the fertilizer on. That's perfect. Inch below the line. For fertilizer, I'm going to be using a 13 balanced blend. The fertility in the garden is actually pretty good. Don't really probably need any fertilizer, but I'm going to be adding some organics to it, and as I turn those under every year, they tend to take out and lock up nutrients during the season. So I'll put a little dab of fertilizer in this bed, and then on the rest of the garden I'll put some more. Doing gardening reminded me of a story. Back when I first started gardening, I got into organic gardening. It was all the rage. A friend of mine taking a class in it. He talked me into subscribing to the Mother Earth News. So I started reading about it. Made sense. Of course, hadn't ever tried it. Didn't know what I was getting into, but anyway, I was working on a putting in an organic garden. And first year I put that in, I think I mentioned to you on a previous video that I lived in town, had an alley way right behind my property, separated me from the houses on the other side. Well, that's where I put my garden, right out alongside that alley. It was right between me and a guy I'm gonna call Neighbor Donnie, where he lived. He lived, him and his family lived just right across the alleyway there. And so the garden was going pretty good. Man, I'd gathered up ladybugs from all around the neighborhood, paid the kids a penny a piece to bring them over and put them in my garden. Thought I was doing pretty good. Corn was tall. Oh my goodness, corn was about 7 foot tall. I'd never grown sweet corn that tall before. But anyway, I was out there doing kind of like this. I was out in that corn patch and I was hoeing up a storm. All of a sudden, I hear a buzzing sound. Didn't know what it was. It was mechanical, it wasn't an insect. So I looked around, didn't see anything, just kept hoeing along, and next thing I knew, the smell, this real pungent smell came across. It was a chemical smell, you know? Now, as an organic gardener, one thing you don't want to smell when you're in your garden is chemicals. It's kind of like anti-organic, poison for the soul. As I hoed along there in the garden, I noticed that the buzzing got louder and the smell got stronger. Then pretty soon, this fog rolled in. Just almost, it was a misty thing, and the smell was so strong, I just had to get out of that garden. I backed out, went back up there toward the house a little bit and started looking around. What did I see? But Neighbor Donnie's yard was completely encased in fog. He was out there fogging with some kind of a chemical in his backyard. That's what I came to realize he was doing. So I hollered at him. I said, "Hey, Donnie." Nothing. Just kept going. So I went around the side to his neighbor's yard, and I got his attention finally. And I said, "Hey, Donnie, shut that thing off." So I asked him, I said, "Donnie, what are you doing?" He said, "I'm fogging." I said, "Well, I can see that, but I mean, what are you fogging for?" And he said, "Oh, Mom and Dad are coming over for hot dogs and burgers this evening, and I got to make sure there's no mosquitoes or chiggers or ticks out here." And I said, "Well, what are you using?" He said, "Oh, it's the good stuff." And I said, "What do you mean by good stuff?" He said, "Well, Dad got it down at work, and you have to have a license to use it." So I asked him, I said, "Donnie, do you know what chemical it is?" And he says, "No," he said, I don't have a clue." He said, "Dad gave it to me in a plastic bottle, didn't have a label on it or anything, and He told me use it full strength outside. I said, well, do you suppose you ought to maybe put that stuff where it doesn't blow on everyone else? And he said, oh, I looked over there. I didn't see anybody outside. I said, yeah, but maybe the windows are open in the house. He said, well, I looked for that, and your windows are all closed. And I said, yeah, well, Donnie, you know, I'm trying to grow an organic garden over here. And he says, boy, this will help with the bugs, won't it? So I told him, I said, yeah, Donnie, it'll take care of the bugs all right, but see, in an organic garden, you don't really use any chemicals. Well, how do you take care of the bugs? So I told him that there's bacterial sprays that you can put on. They're naturally occurring. You can buy them in a bottle, mix them up. And there's some soaps that you can put on. And that's what the purpose was of the ladybugs too. They kill the little aphids. And he said, well, does it work? And I said, I don't know, Donnie, it's the first year, but I was trying it. And I said, see, the idea is that you don't put any chemicals on the garden at all. And he said, oh, did they get on your garden? I said, yeah, they got on me too, Donnie. He said, well, how'd that happen? I said, well, I was over there the other side of the corn, and I was doing some hoeing when that fog rolled in. And he said, well, no wonder I couldn't see you. You've got the biggest corn I've ever seen. I said, yeah, it's right big. So then we walked over to the garden. And I told him, I said, Donnie, let me show you something. We walked over to that corn, and if you've ever sprayed oil on corn, you know what we were looking at. It was almost transparent. Just the leaves were shiny out there in the sun, and that chemical was just baking right through them. And I told Donnie, I said, looks to me like we got a right good coating of that chemical on this corn. He said, will it change the taste? Well, I got the rhubarb bed hoed up, made some little hills. You might have noticed there's a few oak leaves laying around. I don't really remove those. My soil here is just a little bit too sweet. pH is a little bit too high. Those oak leaves, as they rot down, they'll turn it just a little bit more acid. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down and get a couple of buckets full of oak leaf mulch, and we're going to go ahead and get this bed mulched in. I'll take you along with me. So getting back to neighbor Donnie, I told him, I said, Donnie, I don't rightly know whether it'll affect the flavor of them or not. You see, in those days, organic was kind of in its infancy, the type of organic we know of today. You know, it'd been around for centuries, but as far as it being popular, I mean, you couldn't like go down to the grocery store and buy organically grown corn. Because especially around here, you know, we didn't have any hippie communes or any truck drivers trying to cash in on the popularity and run the price up about 3 times what it ought to be. We didn't have none of that. So I told him, I said, Donnie, I have tried Needle's corn. He's been growing organic corn for a couple years, and it's right tasty, but as far as whether or not it'll affect the flavor of this corn, I really don't know. And I said, but I do know that if I don't get that washed off these leaves, it ain't gonna be organic. And he said, I thought organic gardening meant you had to grow it in cow poop. And I said, well, Donnie, that's part of it. I mean, that goes right along with mulching the garden, using compost. And I said, but the chemical part of it's just right in there with it. He says, huh, what will they think of next? And I told him, I said, I don't know, but I hope it's easier to do than this organic gardening is. He said, yeah, it looks to me like a lot of work. So I said, Donnie, I'm gonna have to go out, get the hose, wash this off if I can, because I don't know if it's gonna hurt the plants. And he says, well, it shouldn't hurt the plants. And I said, why is that? He said, well, Dad works in the food plant and they use it down there in that there food plant. When they make their cheese, they spray it. And I said, do they spray it while they're making cheese? He says, oh no, they don't do it then. They do it after everybody's gone home and they're doing the cleanup. And I said, oh. He said, it ought to be safe for food. And I said, yeah, well, you know, there's safe for food, and then there's safe for people. And I got it all over me. So I'm gonna wash this corn off, and then I'm gonna go, there you go, move over there. And then I think I'm gonna go in and take a shower. He said, well, I'll try to be a little more careful next time. And I said, Donnie, I'd really appreciate it. He said, well, I better get out there. I still got to spray the front yard. And I said, well, Donnie, you just go ahead and spray it. I gotta get this cleaned up. And so that's when neighbor Donnie, best housewife on the block, learned more about organic gardening that day than he ever knew before. I washed it off the corn. Told my wife and my daughters, as soon as I get out of this shower, we're gonna head to the creek. Because I didn't know whether or not I was gonna end up being an organic gardener or a wannabe. So where I got to between then and now with organic gardening is there's a whole bunch of good stuff in it. Especially around here where the soil is basically clay and rocks. And that if you got a garden, what works best for me, as I found, by the way, this garden's been here 25 years. The soil is been amended with organics all that time, every year. I put organics in it, put about that much, and then at the end of the year, I till it in. Or I'll put it this year, I'm going to do it in the spring, I'm going to till it in. I mulch with leaf mold. Never have to weed the garden during the growing season. Holds the moisture because we always have a drought. That works pretty good. Because I live in an oak forest, I have compost piles. Takes about 3 years, 2.5 probably, to turn fully from leaves into compost or into dirt. And I use that, mend with that, and when I'm doing some planting of bushes and such, I use that as part of the planting soil. I do use regular fertilizer after I get the organic soil amendments in it. I use regular fertilizer. It's easier to control it. You can get a late season hit, like a Miracle Grow or something like that through the garden hose. Works pretty good in the summer when the plants start drooping. Then I use a granular fertilizer in the spring before I plant. I use a slow release so that it releases over the whole season. And then I have a soil test done about every 3rd year to see where my balance is. And I grow my garden in raised beds. I don't have the fancy boards around it. I use my tractor to push up the mounds. And I'll put this on time lapse and you can watch. And I'll run through here with that tiller over there. And I'll till this down nice and level. But for now, it's break time. Okay, my plan here is that this section right along here is where the rhubarb is. Up along that edge right there is where blueberries are planted. Both those are perennials, so they don't get tilled up. This section right in here is where I plant the vegetables. It's not a big garden, but here's what I'll do. I'm going to take the tractor and go through there, and you'll notice there's 8 little hills up through there. 1, 2, 3, 4, and the same on the other side. I'm going to level those little hills out, pull the soil back from the rhubarb, because when I till it, it's going to push the soil back this way. So I'm going to pull that soil back away from this rhubarb here, and then use it to fill in any low spots I've got in there. After I get that done, I'll put on some fertilizer. Probably put some Epsom salts on it too, because it's showing low on magnesium too. And then I'll run the tiller through there. And after that's done, I'll just kind of shape the outside edge. Yeah, I'll just put you on time lapse and you can watch that sequence. Here it is. Got the rhubarb ready. Won't have to do anything more to it till picking season, till it's time to cut it. Got the blueberries just about ready. Not gonna mulch them back right now. Still a little cool. I want that sun to get in there, and this soil's testing just a little bit too high on pH, so I've got to get some aluminum sulfate in the soil. That's not organic, but it works to get it so that pH goes down. I got this tilled in. This will be my planting bed. It's pretty good soil. Like I said, I've been growing this soil now for about 25 years. There's a few rocks in it. Someplace in here there's a few rocks, but for the most part it's just good rich soil. Last time I had it tested, organics in it came up around 40%. That's pretty high, but it really helps out, especially because we always have a drought year and you need them organics in that soil to hold the moisture. Well, thanks for spending the day in the garden with me. Hopefully you don't have a lot of questions in the comments about organic gardening, because you know, Neighbor Donnie was right. It's a lot of work, and I almost gave up on it years ago. Thanks for watching.